For 18 years, I believed my husband and I were building a life together. Then one quiet evening, he poured himself a glass of wine, smiled, and said he'd finally met the perfect woman. He expected tears. He expected me to fight for our marriage. Instead, I smiled back, wished him luck, unlocked my phone, and sent a single text to my attorney. Execute everything. Now. I didn't threaten him. I didn't argue. I simply waited. 48 minutes later, his phone started ringing nonstop. By midnight, the future he'd secretly planned had completely fallen apart, and he knew I had seen everything. My name is Claire Bennett, and I'm 44 years old. For 18 years, I believed I knew my husband better than anyone else. We had built a comfortable life together in a quiet Chicago suburb. We weren't flashy, but we had a beautiful home, successful careers, weekend traditions, and what everyone called a perfect marriage. Looking back now, I realize perfection is often just a well-decorated illusion. The changes started almost a year before everything fell apart. Ethan suddenly cared far more about his appearance than he ever had. New tailored suits replaced the old ones hanging in his closet. Expensive cologne appeared on the bathroom counter. He started going to the gym before work, something he'd never had time for during our marriage. Then came the phone. It was always face down, always on silent. If a message arrived while we were having dinner, he'd casually flip the screen away before I could accidentally see it. When I asked who kept texting him so late, he'd smile and say, "Work never sleeps." I wanted to believe him. After 18 years together, trust becomes a habit. You stop questioning little things because questioning feels almost insulting. I convinced myself I was imagining problems that didn't exist. Then our 18th wedding anniversary arrived. I made reservations at the restaurant where Ethan had proposed all those years ago. The same corner table, the same piano music floating through the room. I even wore the navy blue dress he'd once told me made me look unforgettable. He barely noticed. Throughout dinner, he kept checking his watch. When dessert arrived, he folded his hands together and sighed as though preparing for a business presentation. "Claire," he said quietly, "we need to talk." Every woman knows those 4 words. I set down my fork. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "I've been trying to find the right time to tell you." "Tell me what?" He inhaled slowly. "I've met someone." The restaurant disappeared around me. The conversations, the music, the clinking glasses. Everything faded into silence. "I didn't plan this," he continued. "It just happened." I stared at him without saying a word. He leaned forward. "Her name is Vanessa." I still said nothing. I finally understand what real compatibility feels like. She loves me for who I am. I haven't felt this alive in years. There it was. The speech. Probably rehearsed dozens of times. He kept talking, explaining how people grow apart, how life changes, how nobody was really to blame. According to Ethan, this wasn't betrayal. It was destiny. "I've found the perfect woman," he finished. "I hope someday you'll understand." I looked into the eyes of the man I'd spent nearly half my life loving. Oddly enough, I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity, because everything he was saying only confirmed what I'd quietly suspected for months. He expected tears. He expected accusations. Maybe even a dramatic scene that would make him feel justified. Instead, I smiled. A small, polite smile. "I'm genuinely happy you found what you were looking for," I said. He blinked, almost disappointed. "You're not upset?" "I think everyone deserves honesty." His shoulders relaxed immediately. For the first time that evening, he looked relieved. He mistook my calmness for surrender. He had no idea it meant something entirely different. I reached into my purse, unlocked my phone beneath the table, and opened a conversation that had already been waiting for this exact moment. "My attorney." I typed only 3 words. "Execute everything. Today." I pressed send. The message delivered instantly. I slipped the phone back into my purse before Ethan noticed. "So," he said carefully, "I guess this is goodbye." I stood, picked up my coat, and looked at him one last time. "No," I answered softly. "This," I gave him one final smile, "is only the beginning." I didn't cry on the drive home. Not because I was strong, because I'd already cried months earlier, the day I accidentally discovered Ethan wasn't the man I thought he was. It started with a credit card notification. Our bank sent alerts for purchases over $500. One Saturday morning, while Ethan claimed he was attending a leadership seminar, a notification appeared for a luxury boutique almost 200 miles away. When I asked him about it later, he smiled without hesitation. They charged the wrong location. Happens all the time. I nodded, but something about the answer didn't feel right. That night, after he fell asleep, I checked our account history. The boutique wasn't the only unusual charge. There were expensive restaurants we'd never visited, hotel reservations during supposed business conferences, weekend flights he had never mentioned. None of it proved an affair, but together they painted a picture I couldn't ignore. I didn't confront him. I wanted facts, not excuses. The following Monday, I quietly scheduled a meeting with Rachel Monroe, a family attorney my sister had recommended years earlier. Rachel listened without interrupting while I showed her every statement, every receipt, every strange expense. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "If he's planning something," she said calmly, "the worst thing you can do is let him know you've discovered it. So what do? You prepare." And that's exactly what I did. For the next 5 months, I lived 2 completely different lives. At home, I was the same wife Ethan expected. I cooked dinner. We hosted friends. We celebrated birthdays. I smiled in family photographs. Behind the scenes, Rachel assembled a completely different picture. Every financial record, every investment account, every property document, every retirement statement. I also met with my accountant, David Keller, who had handled my family's finances since before Ethan and I were married. David uncovered something Ethan never realized. Most people assumed our wealth came from Ethan's successful consulting business. It didn't. Years before our marriage, my parents had transferred ownership of several commercial properties into a family trust. Over time, those investments had grown substantially. Although Ethan enjoyed the lifestyle they created, many of those assets legally remained separate property. He had spent years believing they belonged equally to both of us. He never bothered asking. He simply assumed. Rachel smiled the day we reviewed everything. "Claire," she said, "he's planning his future using assets that aren't actually his." That sentence changed everything. From that moment forward, every document was organized. Every account was reviewed. Every legal filing was drafted. Everything waited for only one thing: his decision. And tonight, sitting across from me in that restaurant, he'd finally made it. That single text message I'd sent wasn't emotional. It wasn't revenge. It was authorization. Rachel already had every document prepared. The moment she received my message, she filed the divorce petition electronically, activated financial protection orders where legally appropriate, and notified institutions exactly as we'd planned. I was halfway home when my phone buzzed. "Rachel, everything has been submitted." I replied with one word: "Thank you." Meanwhile, Ethan believed he was celebrating a fresh start. What he didn't know was that his phone had already begun filling with notifications, requests for document verification, temporary reviews on several shared financial accounts, emails from attorneys, messages he wouldn't understand until he opened them. I imagined him smiling beside Vanessa, convinced his difficult conversation was finally over. Then the first alert appeared, followed by another, and another. The confident man who had walked into dinner expecting complete control was suddenly staring at a screen filled with warnings he never expected. For the first time in months, Ethan realized he wasn't the only person who had been making plans. 48 minutes after I sent that text, Ethan finally called. I let it ring twice before answering. "What did you do?" he demanded. His voice no longer carried the confidence I'd heard across the restaurant table. Instead, there was panic.
Pure panic.
"I don't know what you mean," I replied calmly. "My bank says several accounts are under legal review.
My attorney just emailed me.
Someone filed for divorce before I even got home." "I know. You planned this." "I prepared for it." There was silence. Then I heard another voice in the background. A woman.
"Vanessa."
"Ethan, what's happening?" He lowered the phone, but not enough. I'll explain later. No, I said quietly. You should probably explain now.
He ignored me.
I'm coming home. You can, I answered, but it won't change anything. He hung up. An hour later, he stormed through our front door. His face was flushed. His tie was loose. The confidence he'd worn like a custom suit was completely gone. You tricked me. I looked up from the dining table where I was calmly organizing folders.
No.
I simply refuse to let you surprise me. He slapped several printed emails onto the table. My attorney says the divorce has already been filed. That's correct. My access to our investment accounts has changed. Temporary legal procedures. You froze everything. I protected what legally needed protecting. His breathing became heavier. You knew I was leaving. I knew months ago.
He stared at me.
You knew. I knew about the hotels. His expression changed. The restaurants. Another step backward. The weekends that were never business trips. His shoulders dropped. And Vanessa. For several seconds, he couldn't speak. Finally, he whispered, How long? Long enough to realize confronting you would have only given you time to hide more. He sat down heavily. I never thought. I know. You thought I'd cry. He rubbed his forehead. I made mistakes. You made choices. They're not the same. They are when you repeat them for months. His phone buzzed again. He looked down. Another message. This one was from Vanessa. He opened it. As he read, the color drained from his face. What happened? I asked. He swallowed. She wants space. I wasn't surprised. People who chase fantasy often disappear when reality arrives. A few days later, our attorneys handled nearly every conversation. Because my family's trust owned most of the major assets, Ethan quickly realized the future he'd imagined wasn't legally waiting for him. The luxury vacations, the vacation home, the investment income, the lifestyle he'd assumed would continue. Much of it had never belonged to him. He had confused living comfortably with ownership. By the second month, Vanessa had quietly ended their relationship. According to mutual friends, she'd believed Ethan was financially independent. She never realized how much of that security had been built alongside me over 18 years. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. There were no dramatic courtroom speeches. No shouting. No public revenge. Just signatures. Legal documents. And consequences. I sold the house and moved into a smaller place overlooking the lake. For the first time in years, the silence felt peaceful instead of lonely. People occasionally ask whether I regret staying calm that night. I always give the same answer.
No.
Because anger would have lasted a few minutes. Preparation changed the rest of my life. Sometimes people think the strongest response to betrayal is revenge. They're wrong. The strongest response is quietly protecting yourself long before the person who underestimated you realizes the game has already ended.